great conference. I hope everybody's having a great week this week. It's certainly been a very valuable experience for everyone here, I think, both from new user side. Folks have been doing this for a long time and been at several of these conferences. I think this year everyone would agree that we've kind of set the bar that much higher again. And today, STEM Day, I think everybody's heard about the STEM Education Day. At least I hope you have. If you can, interact with some of the local students and kids and young folks and educators that we have that are going to be milling around the different venues of the conference today. We've had some mentoring sessions this morning. We've got another one this afternoon. We had an ARIS ham radio contact with the ISS crew this morning that went off without a hitch. Those things are always a little bit risky, but it certainly went off without a hitch this morning. So that was fantastic. And today, you know, we're happy to bring to you once again some just terrific young experimenters and space station explorers, as we call them. This afternoon, as part of the STEM education plenary session, you're going to hear from 4 different teams who have very recently flown experiments or payloads on the International Space Station, have actually gotten some terrific data and results. Some have completed their post-flight analysis. Some are in the middle of it. That's how fresh some of these are. So please sit back, enjoy the presentations. We would encourage at the close of the panel presentation, if you have questions and answers, you'll have that opportunity. So without further ado, we'll get this thing kicked off. It's my great pleasure and my great honor to introduce our moderator today. One of the great benefits that we have in being in a great town like Washington, D.C., we've got a fantastic university here, Howard University, and we have been honored today by having Dr. Wayne Frederick, the president of Howard University, who will moderate our STEM panel today. So, Dr. Frederick.
Good day. It's a pleasure to be here, and I recognize that I stand between you and the students' presentation, so I'm not going to keep you very long because we have 4 excellent presentations by students that we'll hear about today. But before we get started, just to frame this issue around STEM and the importance of it. On Howard University's campus, this is an issue that we think is absolutely essential for the nation's success. The need to broaden participation in STEM is particularly relevant for those who identify as African American or Black in this country. In 2008, Blacks represented 12% of the U.S. population and about 11% of all undergraduate enrollments. However, they earned only 9% of STEM bachelor's degrees. Historically, Black colleges and universities like Howard University were responsible for some 20-something% of those degrees awarded to those students. And that support of STEM education continues to be essential for our HBCUs in particular. Howard University has started a Bison STEM Scholar program. This fall semester, we had 300 applications. The students had to have an interest in a MD, PhD, or a PhD in STEM coming out of high school. And I'm glad to tell you that we were planning to take only 10 students. We had 300 applications, interviewed 92 students, and we decided to take 33 students with an average GPA of 3.86 and an average SAT score of 1360. So when people ask me about the pipeline and the quality of the students are certainly there, but they certainly need a certain exposure in order to get there. I often use myself as an example. I came to Howard University in 1988, which seems like a very, very long while ago today. And as a 16-year-old, I was very interested in getting an MD because I have sickle cell anemia. No one spoke to me about research or spoke to me about a PhD. I have no regrets now as a practicing surgical oncologist and a university president. But one of the things I did recognize back then, and I recognize today as well, is that exposure and that conversation can certainly make a significant difference. And I think when you see and hear some of the students' presentations and you see programs like the ISS program and the students embedded in it, you recognize that exposure is a major part of what helps us choose the types of fields that we go into. Although I had sickle cell and I fell in love with surgical oncology, I did so because of a mentor. And I think that's the other thing that we recognize as well, that these students certainly need mentoring. Lack of funding and tuition support is clearly an issue, and more programs that support that certainly will help students, like the students you'll hear today, get through these programs and get through our programs at our colleges and universities. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the students. You will hear the student presentations, which are teed up. I'd like you to save all your questions for the very end, and we'll have a Q&A session at the very end. If you hear something in the presentation that you specifically would like to address with one of the students, I'd like you to just make a note and wait until all of the presentations are done, and we'll take all of the questions at the end. So first we have Craft Academy, and the students will introduce themselves and give their presentation. So let's give them a round of applause.
Hello, everyone. My name is Will Casto, and this is my research partner, Danielle Gibson. We're graduates of the Craft Academy in Morehead State University. The Craft Academy is a dual-credit residential high school opportunity for juniors and seniors in high school that they may apply to as sophomores. And Danielle and I were lucky enough to be accepted, and it presented us with many wonderful opportunities, one of which was to be around professors who participate in research. We took anatomy and physiology our second semester with Dr. Michael Fultz, and one day while covering muscle tissues, he mentioned his research into the contraction process within smooth muscle cells. And this intrigued Danielle and I because it was honestly probably our first glimpse into uncharted territory within science. So after class, we approached him and asked him to participate. And after this discussion, it became apparent that the opportunity for good, solid research was going to be deterred by budget cuts within the university. But he was still going to try to find space for us in his lab. So we went to the assistant director of academic services at the Craft Academy, Miss Jen Carter, and told her the situation, and she said, well, before we do anything, how about I introduce you to the wonderful team at Space Tango?
And that, ladies and gentlemen, catapulted us right into space. Now, the question we like to start off by asking is, what if the next big breakthrough in science and in medicine isn't on Earth, but in space? Most of you know the effects of microgravity on biological systems, whether it's the human body or something like a plant. But if you don't, we think Chris Kimmel said it best when he said, when you remove a living organism from the force of gravity, strange things happen. The biological and communication systems for cells become scrambled, and organisms and systems act differently. Now, our research specifically is one example of a new initiative sending experiments to the International Space Station to find medical benefits for problems we face here on Earth, an initiative called exomedicine. Will and I are taking advantage of the new platform offered to us by the International Space Station to study arterial smooth muscle. Smooth muscle is one in 3 types of muscle in the human body, yet it's the only one where we don't fully understand how it contracts. Typically here on Earth, during contraction of these cells, we see a phenomenon called cytoskeletal remodeling, where your alpha-actin fibers are going to vertically reorient themselves, while the beta-actin fibers shorten, typical of what we see of any other muscle type. However, research into this process has reached what Will and I like to refer to as a stagnation point, meaning that scientists are all seeing the same thing, but they're not agreeing on the what and why behind what they're seeing. So we're hoping that by sending this and studying this process in microgravity, that it would allow us to better understand, and whether it's glimpsing new observations or making new discoveries, that allows us to better understand this process.
As you can see here, there's quite a thick layer of smooth muscle that's found within the arterial walls. The contraction of this muscle is what helps maintain one's blood pressure. And this is key in our research's importance because if we can understand how and when this muscle contracts, then we can understand how to better manipulate it. This would allow for better treatments for people who suffer from abnormal blood pressure conditions like hypertension, hypotension, and various cardiovascular diseases that result from these. And hypertension is very rampant in eastern Kentucky, which is where Danielle and I are from. So with this research, we hope to not only go back and help those people, but people across the nation and worldwide.
Now, in order to send such a complicated experiment to space, we partnered with Space Tango, a research and design company that specializes in microgravity based right in Lexington, Kentucky. Now, not only does our experiment consist of your basic laboratory procedures, but cell culturing, which of course has been done in microgravity. However, it's not been done in an autonomous module before, which is our goal in designing this module. So as you can see behind me, the cell culturing system is the main component of our module. That's where the cells are going to live during their stay in orbit. However, we have other subsystems that support and maintain the environment that our cells need. including fluid retainment, fluid exchange, temperature control, gas control, and an imaging system. That way we can get constant feedback from our cells during their stay in orbit. Now, since this is a pretty complicated experiment and the first time engineering like this has been done on a module, we did unfortunately have a very small engineering failure in one of our subsystems that kept us from getting valid scientific data on our first launch back on SpaceX 10. However, we treated it as a learning experience, as you should do in science, and we improved the module and the engineering since then to prepare for our next launch, which is SpaceX 12 tentatively. As you can see behind and on the presentations, in our next module, we've kept a lot of the same systems. However, like I said, they're just improved. But apart from this module, we're also going to be launching a simplified module where this procedure is just simplified so we can get some raw data about our cells in microgravity. Now, in order to send such an experiment to space, Will and I practically live in lab during the months before launch. We're perfecting our techniques, and we're also getting our cells, which we call our babies, ready for launch. Not only are we doing that, but we're also teaching the Space Tango team how to work with the cells, as they're actually going to be the ones putting the cells into the module right before takeoff.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Landing legs up deployed. Stage 1 touchdown confirmed. Landing operator moving on landing operator.
This was a once-in-a-lifetime experience for me and Danielle. To see something that we had worked so hard on come to fruition and be sent to the International Space Station, we were in such a special place like Cape Canaveral, working along such prominent scientists, in an effort to expand our knowledge, in our case, about the human body. It was a feeling that I never want to let escape me. It was that internal confirmation that science is my true love and it's what I'm truly passionate about. And I feel like it's a rush that will never be paralleled.
And for me, personally, after attending the launch at Cape Canaveral, it gave me a new sense of hope. Hope that if I could send something to space at 17 and 5 or 10 or even 20 years, as long as I'm willing to put in the hard work like I did before, the possibilities of what I could do are truly limitless. And now since launch, Will and I have had to move on to the next steps in our life, which we're still working on, of course. Most recently, I've been completing an internship with the Exomedicine Center for Applied Technology at Morehead State University, a new program being brought to the school to teach students about the design and fabrication process of the technology that we need to send experiments like ours to space. Apart from that, I've also been building some exomedicine curriculum that we're actually going to get to test next week at Go for Launch in conjunction with Higher Orbits and the Craft Academy. Our goal is to really educate young scientists and young minds about exomedicine and the cool things happening in space. And now next month, after launch, of course, Will and I will be going back to university, except not as high school students. I'll be attending Morehead State University to complete my degree in biomedical science, and Will's going to be going to the University of Kentucky to study neuroscience.
This experience has inspired me to continue research throughout my undergraduate years at the University of Kentucky. I was recently accepted into the STEMCATS program, which is a living learning program dedicated to giving undergraduate students ample research opportunity. After Danielle and I receive our undergraduate degrees, we plan on attending medical school and pursuing medical careers.
And now our program, and all the other ones you're going to hear about today, all have one thing in common, and that's that they foster the education, both curriculum-based and project-based, of the young engineers and scientists that are going to be working on whatever it is that we leave off. So our future of our work depends on their efforts. So it should be important to make sure they're just as knowledgeable and passionate about it as we are today. Without our program, Will and I wouldn't be here today. So we have to be willing to invest resources into making that happen, whether it's money or whether it's your time. Just keep those young minds in mind.
And as Danielle mentioned previously, none of this would be possible without the endless support of the Craft Academy, Morehead State University, and Dr. Fultz, the wonderful team at Space Tango, and a whole host of wonderful companies that have supported us throughout our journey. Thank you for your time.
I just want to let both of you know that we have a medical school at Howard University, so I'd be happy to see you. Our next presenters are for NASA Hunch, and they will present, and we'll keep it going. Let's give them a round of applause as they come through.
Hello, my name is Scott Crowner.
And I'm Gavin Morganegg.
We are seniors attending Eagle Crest High School in Denver, Colorado. We, accompanied by 4 other students and several school staff, have recently contributed to a multi-year project that focused on the formation of silver crystals in microgravity. Our experiment was selected from within the NASA Hunch program to be flown to the International Space Station. We'd like to share a bit about it with you today. In 2012, Eagle Crest adopted a NASA initiative known as Hunch, High School Students United with NASA to create hardware. This program allows high-performing, motivated students to be contracted by NASA to design, build, and test innovative technologies for use aboard the International Space Station. Hunch is subdivided into the Extreme Sciences Division, the Design and Prototype Division, and the Culinary Division. The project we worked on was a microgravity experiment designed for the Extreme Sciences Division. We named it Cosmos, short for crystallization of silver nitrate in microgravity on a silver cathode.
The Cosmos experiment began as part of the Hunch program in 2014. Previous members of the Hunch team, Tom Broxenbach, Riley Abbott, Ben Sheffer, and Lars Streith, designed and built an experiment that would test the differences in crystal structure of a silver crystal grown in microgravity and in 1G. These students flew this project aboard the Parabolic Microgravity Aircraft, or the Vomit Comet, in April of 2015 at Ellington Field at the Johnson Space Center. Though neither Scott nor I were part of this microgravity flight, the experience for those students and those teachers was surely one that they will remember for the rest of their lives. A few months later, in June of that year, we were notified that the experiment had been selected by CASIS to fly to the International Space Station in the summer of the following year. We were thrilled, but we also had to completely redesign and rebuild the experiment to fit the safety and engineering standards held by NASA. The apparatus for growing these silver crystals in a controlled manner is based on electrolyzing a solution of silver nitrate with a very low voltage. This causes the growth of silver crystals on the electrodes within the experiment. This apparatus had to conform to the stringent requirements of NASA concerning the containment of dangerous compounds, in this case, silver nitrate. Due to these policies, the silver nitrate had to be enclosed within 3 separate layers of containment to prevent any leakage. This entailed a 1.5 unit nanolab, a Lexan box, and vials containing the solution.
Another precaution was the use of no more than 0.8 volts of electricity for the crystallization process, as to prevent the creation of hydrogen gas. For this, we used a voltage regulator designed specifically for this experiment by Aero Electronics. Electronic components also needed to be isolated with electrical tape. Finally, when it came time for the actual construction of this device, it was drawn up in SolidWorks, a 3D modeling software. We then proceeded to use that design to 3D print, laser cut, and mill the parts required to construct this assembly. In July of 2016, the entire Cosmos team and Assistant Principal Jim Rome went to the Kennedy Space Center to view the launch of the CRS-9, a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket carrying our experiment. This launch was especially significant as it was the first time SpaceX successfully landed the first stage of their rocket on land. Our view of this was simply spectacular. Just across a bay, we saw the light of the rocket turn night into daylight, followed by a deep rumble that was 20 seconds after the actual start of the launch, a bizarre phenomenon to experience. Then, just minutes later, we watched the whole thing happen in reverse as the first stage descended onto the rocket pad. As you might imagine, witnessing and even taking part in this astronomical milestone carried an exceptional deal of excitement for us all.
For all of you who have actually witnessed a rocket launch, you'll empathize with me when I say that it doesn't do it justice just to explain it. We'll still do our best, though. Simply being at an event that is literally laying the path for future science is incredible. The entire time we spent down in Florida, the entire duration of this experiment had led up to the moment that the countdown hit 0 and the rocket lit up. My goal until last summer had been to launch something into space that I had built, and there I was, watching the experiment that we had designed slowly rise into the sky aboard a massive rocket. The rumble, the blinding light, all of it is permanently imprinted in my memory and will surely inspire me in the future.
Cosmos stayed on the ISS for 2 months, but was run soon after its capsule was docked. When the experiment was returned to Earth, it was delivered to Eagle Crest in September of last year, bound in a box, plastic wrapping, a foam encasing, the NanoRax container, sealed with silicone. With the other team members off to college, Gavin and I were left to recover the results. It was quite a pain to open, but the outcome was certainly worth it.
Once we opened the experiment, we found that all the vials had actually leaked. But the leak was still contained within the second layer of containment, as not to actually contaminate the space station. Once we got into the vials of solution, we observed that even though they had leaked, there were still crystals of silver growing off of the electrodes. What we noticed about these crystals that was peculiar was the delicate strands of silver wire that actually bridged the gaps between the electrodes. Based on these observations, we contacted a professor at the Colorado School of Mines with access to an electron scanning microscope to help us gather some preliminary results.
Eventually, Gavin and I, accompanied by Mr. Schlichting, took the crystals to Colorado School of Mines to be analyzed under electron scanning microscope. With the help of Dr. Spear, we were able to view the structures at up to 10,000 times magnification. Our endeavor to recover the images of these crystals took 2 days of work.
While we were up there, we took many pictures of these crystals at varying magnifications. Being able to see these pictures was an amazing experience, as it let us see something that had never been accomplished before. These crystals were one of a kind. Dr. Spear helped us learn how to use the electron microscope and let us explore the crystal structures on our own. Being given this opportunity was an incredible experience.
Later, we sent the crystals to the University of Wisconsin to be analyzed through single crystal X-ray diffraction by Dr. Guzai. In conclusion, he and another professor found no significant difference in basic crystal structure between the samples taken on Earth and on the International Space Station. However, this knowledge could be useful for future projects involving the formation of crystals in microgravity. In the end, Gavin and I have learned a great deal from this experience. Conducting high-level research in accordance with NASA is truly a pleasure and has had a deep impact not only on our lives, but also on many of those who seek STEM-related careers. The 4 other members of the Cosmos team have since gone on to pursue STEM-related degrees in college. They now attend the University of Oklahoma, Colorado State University, Oberlin College, and MIT. This mind-blowing experience has certainly impacted my life and will certainly affect my career someday. My personal interests lie in biotechnology, and I plan to pursue the subject in college and continue to devote my life to making the world a better place through engineering.
Experiences like this don't just fade out of people's memory. They stick with us for the rest of our lives. This experience has and will alter my entire life from now and on. After I graduate high school next year, I plan on going to college and getting my degree in mechanical and aerospace engineering, and continue on to become an aerospace engineer, continuing our mission into space and beyond. Thank you so much to all the people who made this possible, and thank you all for your attention this afternoon.
another excellent presentation. And next we have Quest for Space. Will present next.
Hi, my name is Rohan Vishwanathan, and I'm a freshman at Valley Christian Schools in San Jose, California. I was one of the developers of the Quest for Space program.
And my name is Jalissa Herrera, and I'm a junior at Andrew Hill High School. I was a mechanical engineer as a participant in the Quest for Space program.
Last year, in November of 2016, the first ever Windows 10 IoT device was activated aboard the International Space Station. On a video taken by the Windows device, the first ever autonomous science platform run on a LEGO Mindstorms unit in space is seen taking temperature and humidity readings, using what many scientists and engineers have called to be one of the most advanced experiment platforms they've ever seen aboard the ISS. This experiment was part of the Quest for Space program, run by the Quest Institute. Now, a year later, the Quest for Space program has reached out to many different partner schools, such as Andrew P. Hill, who are running a specially designed curriculum to teach students about STEM and its applications aboard the International Space Station. The lead educator for the Quest for Space program is Mrs. Bakken. The objective of the Quest for Space program this year was to observe how heat and humidity would behave in microgravity. In order to get a holistic picture of heat and humidity on the space station, our final flight module contained many sub-experiments. One of our main experiments involved a desiccant given to us by a scientist who wanted her research on the International Space Station because the desiccant was supposed to be more effective. We put it in a case and tested it so that our entire experiment module became a no humidity environment for us to test our hypothesis. The next step after defining our objective was designing our module. We made software and hardware flowcharts with our measurement pseudocode. We even made a schematic for our electricians to work based off of. On the screen are pictures of our software and electrical team members working, as well as one of our software flowcharts.
One of our primary sources of documentation were our engineering notebooks. In them, we wrote down every step, every piece of data, and all of our trials and errors. What our engineering notebooks made me realize is that sometimes some things take more time than others, and that it's okay if things don't go right the first time. We were creating a program that would automate our data recording, but that didn't go perfectly the first time. So once again, it was all about trial and error and about being resourceful, so instead we switched to manually recording our data. And when our program did work, we let it run, and we noticed that our Excel graph and our data matched up perfectly. So when it worked, we all started cheering and high-fiving each other, and it was just a really cool experience. But it wasn't, it was the beauty and the struggle that we didn't appreciate until we were going through those trial and errors.
So, as part of our experiment, we had many themes such as conduction, convection, and radiation. We found out that a lot of the radiation on the space station is protected by the astronaut suits, and we wanted to test that out in a smaller module, which became our flight experiment. So on the screen is actually a picture of our final flight experiment. You might notice that the clear polycarb is our mechanical module. We have the circuit acting as the electrical portion. And some of you guys might recognize that the microcontroller that we're using is actually the LEGO Mindstorms unit. Now, the great thing about the Quest for Space program, like Mr. Musk actually mentioned in his presentation yesterday, was that the entire platform is completely reusable. Instead of all of the partner schools sending up 12 of the same hardware, we send up one experiment module and we timeshare the partners' programs so that they can get their data, we can send it back to them, all while keeping it in a very reusable standpoint. Secondly, the Quest for Space program is really usable for all levels of ages, whether it be a first grader or a senior in high school. A third grader, for example, might play around with the large motor, learn about servos, program a simple program, and see it run. whereas a senior can actually use a special breadboard adapter that we got from Dexter Industries to split the EV3 wire into its separate electrical components, where the wires can actually be managed in very complex ways in order to add to the complexity of the electrical circuit and the mechanical design. So this is actually a video of the first Windows 10 IoT module. On the screen, we have the names of our sponsors, as well as the names of our mentors and the developers of the Quest for Space program. On the bottom left, during the names, you'll see that there's a little T and a little H, and that's because the module was constantly reading the temperature and the humidity from the International Space Station. You might notice little cubes floating around. That's because for our beta test, we were looking at magnetism in space. So by vibrating the module, we could see how zinc, copper, and nickel would react in microgravity, how they would attract, how they would retract, and how they would bounce off of each other. So we actually got the data back just recently, and we're currently processing it. The Quest for Space program also has a huge impact on the students. It teaches engineering skills, leadership, and of course, teamwork. At the beginning of the program, all of the students are separated into separate groups based on their interests and their areas of expertise, whether it be mechanical design, electrical, software work, or quality assurance. Each member from a group comes together to form a team who's assigned a leader. The leader creates a full schedule, like in an actual enterprise, and makes sure that the team follows the schedule and also assists the team if they need any help. Secondly, the Quest for Space program inspires academic and career choices in all students. After working on the Quest for Space program, I, for one, am definitely inspired to pursue the career of an engineer and set my own academic goals to hopefully achieve that one day. Lastly, the Quest for Space program promotes a hands-on, project-based learning environment where students can not only learn from lectures, but can also apply them in an experiment of their own. Going back to the desiccant case example, a student might learn about how a desiccant works in a lecture from their teacher, how it sucks out all of the humidity. Then they can actually go and prototype it with the EV3's large motor. They can see how the humidity is actually taken out, and they can use sensors to test that and prove their hypothesis.
I was introduced to the Quest for Space program through Firehouse. What is Firehouse? Firehouse is a program that is introduced to students with 4 or more Fs or that are on the verge of not graduating. It was created by Dr. Sunny Lara. When he was in prison, he realized that 75% of state inmates could have avoided prison if somebody would have just helped them graduate high school. Quest for Space and Firehouse really helped me because before I didn't care about my grades, I didn't care about graduating, or I didn't care about school in general. Quest for Space and Firehouse inspired me to care about graduating, care about my career, and care about my future. Before, I didn't want to move schools due to the social implications that were involved with moving schools. I cared more about my friends than about moving schools. For me, in classes like history, it was really hard for me to focus on mainly because I couldn't really see the events that the teacher was talking about. But in Quest for Space, I was a mechanical engineer, and I was actually able to create and see how humidity was tested, and I was actually able to create an experiment that tested it on the ISS. And we were broken up into teams with kids from our school that we've seen around but we've never talked to, and when our experiment didn't work, we all stayed for about 4 or more hours after a school day to work on it, and none of us have ever worked so hard on something like that ever, but we were all just trying to work together to get this done in the time frame that was given to us. Enabling all students of all backgrounds and walks of life to send something to the ISS is the right thing to do. Instead of limiting this research to students who already have good grades, Quest for Space opened up to Firehouse students who are known for struggling in school. If Quest for Space was able to inspire me, it is able to inspire kids all around the world to learn to grow love for math, science, and engineering. Programs like this will create a better educational system and a better economy. And eventually, programs like STEM will create a better world.
Thank you to all of our partner schools, all of our sponsors, and special thanks to all of our mentors. Without you guys, none of this would have been possible. Thank you guys for your time.
Absolutely excellent message. Last but not least, Student Space Flight Experiments Program.
Test. Test. Hello.
Thank you for the introduction. Our talk is titled Microbial Pathogenicity and Microgravity, Enabling a Future of Long-Term Space Flight. So my name is Gary Sarouche. I'm sharing the stage with Aaron Solomon, one of my team members, and our third team member, Jan Kazansky, couldn't be with us here today. And we're coming to you all the way from the University of Maryland, College Park, just 20 minutes away from here. So the future of space. Most of you probably know that by the year 2025, NASA wants to send the first manned mission to the red planet of Mars. And in order to get there, these astronauts will have to spend an extended amount of time, probably years, in a confined space in close proximity with each other. And of course, astronaut health is one of the prime concerns for NASA. A chief threat to astronaut health is a threat from infectious diseases, the viruses and bacteria that give us the same diseases we have here on Earth. A study funded by NASA has actually shown that bacteria that were grown in space and then returned to Earth are able to cause more disease and be more virulent than bacteria that were grown on Earth the entire time. As you can see on the bar graph, the bacteria from the flight have a lower LD, or lethal dose, required to kill mice than bacteria grown on ground. And the same data is corroborated in the line graph showing percent survival of these mice after exposure to the bacteria. So like everything else in biology, genes in the bacteria are encoded for in static DNA. And when they are turned on, they are converted from this DNA to RNA and eventually into functional protein. And by measuring the levels of RNA, one would essentially be able to see what genes are being turned on in these bacteria and to tease out specifically what kinds of genes are turned on in the environment of microgravity. And our experiment that we sent up to the ISS and received just about 2 weeks ago looked at doing exactly this. We had a tube that was split up into 3 chambers, one of which contained inactivated bacterial spores, followed by liquid broth or food for the bacteria to grow, and the third chamber included RNA Protect, a preserving agent for the critical RNA compound. And once the chamber was safely aboard the ISS and situated, we removed the first barrier, flooding the spores with the food, giving them ample time to grow and use all of the nutrients available to them to fill the space. And once we reached that threshold, we removed the last barrier, flooding it with this preserving agent and preserving the RNA for it to come back to our hands so we could test it. And it undocked from the ISS and came to us.
All right, so over the July 4th weekend, as millions of Americans across the country were sending fireworks up in what they ostensibly thought were brilliant displays of light and sound, SpaceX Dragon was dropping through the atmosphere back into the Pacific Ocean at what was certainly more an impressive display of light and sound. And on that SpaceX Dragon, the first one to be reused, was this cute little tube of that preserved bacterial RNA that we're so concerned with. Again, that critical intermediary molecule that tells us about how genes are changing in their expression in response to microgravity and allows us to understand what's causing this uptick in pathogenicity by bacteria in space. So here on the left, we see those tubes that have come back down and some from our Earth control samples. And on the right, you'll see RNA that we've extracted from those tubes. So what do we do with that RNA? Well, we want to use it to understand how these bacteria are changing their gene expression and gene function to become more pathogenic. So we take that RNA, which is very unstable, and we convert it to an analog known as cDNA, which is much more stable, which we can then chuck in to a Illumina high-seq sequencer, which goes ahead and reads off base pairs of all the sequences that comprise the genes that were being expressed by the bacteria in microgravity. We get quite a few of these, actually, about 7.5 billion base pairs for every run we do. That stretches to Mars and back pretty much on its own. We don't really need to go there. And so we take these genes And to understand what they mean functionally, we have to understand what each of these individual sequences correspond to. So each of these sequences represents one fragment of a gene somewhere along the bacterial chromosome. And because of the indentured servitude of graduate students all across the world for the past 100 years, we actually know some of the functions of those genes, which is really helpful when ascribing some significance to what they mean. And to quantify how heavily expressed each of these genes are, we basically count them with a little bit more complicated math. And once we've counted both our Earth and our space genes, we can take them and come up with a chart or a table that looks something like this, where we have on the x-axis a handful of genes, on the y-axis how heavily expressed they are, and in blue we have our space samples, in red we have our Earth samples, and we can identify genes that are differentially expressed between Earth and space. And these genes are interesting to us because they represent some fundamental difference, something that microgravity is doing to affect how bacteria behave in space, something that's encouraging this uptick in pathogenicity. And so for us, we're interested in taking these genes and running further experiments on them to identify what possible therapeutic targets there might exist out there to create drugs against that could help preserve astronaut health while in space. And so the goal here is, of course, to develop those new therapeutic targets. After we're done all this sequencing work, we'll deposit the transcriptional information in a publicly accessible database like GEO, run by the NIH, because the beauty of a technique like this, like RNA sequencing, is that we're not just capturing information about pathogenicity, but about the entirety of bacterial structure and function while they're living in space, which allows researchers of all sorts to make queries about things like metabolism or growth or death. Our timeline is a launch, which happened on June 3rd, a return to Earth on July 2nd. We're working on analysis now, and any scientist knows that our publication deadlines are very, very rosy. We should probably push that back by a year or two. And those are our goals for the time being. But so what's the impact of this program really been? So fundamentally, it's redefined what's possible for us as university students to be able to carry out research like this on board the International Space Station, to marry space research with something like RNA sequencing, a very powerful technique that's close to our hearts as biologists, is truly amazing. And because of how amazing that is, it's really allowed us to redefine, inspiration and popularization, right? Our school's been buzzing with news of this experiment for like a year now. It's been incredible, the people we've got to talk to, the people we've got to inspire, the students that are excited, the people we've been able to get enrolled in a similar program to do experiments in the future is just wonderful. And part of that wonderfulness is the ability to translate science that we learn in school to a real-world impact that could have implications for how we explore other planets, which is a dream that is near and dear to both of our hearts and I'm sure everyone else here. And we've also gotten to do a lot of outreach in the process, both local and global. We've gone to local high schools, talked with their students, got them interested in science and in similar programs. And when we were down at Cape Canaveral this past month, we actually got to meet with a high school from Brazil who was interested in having us work with their students to get them excited and enrolled in similar programs. So that's been a really wonderful experience.
And to echo essentially everything that Aaron has said up till now, this whole experience has given us the full scientist training, is what I like to call it. From designing the experiment to writing a grant, winning the funding, collaborating with real-time, full-time scientists at the University of Maryland, presenting our findings at venues just like this one, and eventually publishing them. We've seen the ins and outs of the scientific process, which for recent college graduates looking to become scientists in the future, this has been a truly invaluable experience. And on top of that, it has introduced us to the idea of pursuing space science as a potential career path. As Aaron said, we're all biology people, and we're all super geeked out and interested by space. And to see that we could marry those two interests has been amazing.
We'd like to acknowledge quite a few people who have made this experiment possible. Of course, our graduate student, Cordelia Weiss at the University of Maryland, Drs. Wade Winkler, Kenneth Frauworth, Daniel Serrano, SSCP, and Dr. Jeff Goldstein, who's sitting down front, who makes all of this possible, and the NanoRacks team, as well as the Maryland Space Grant Consortium and the University of Maryland System. And we'd, of course, like to thank you for joining us in our quest to help humanity reach its next destination safely. Thank you.
I'm the proud father of a 13-year-old and 11-year-old, and I have to tell you, I tell people all the time that I'm not cynical about our youth because I think the youth of this country have a very, very bright future, and so America has a bright future as a result. But I have to tell you today, we heard from a freshman all the way to undergrad students, and absolutely impressive. So let's give them a warm, warm round of applause. This was so exciting. I looked out to the audience. I saw a couple of people wiping away tears from their eyes. They were so touched listening to science. So I got to go home and tell my kids about this. So we'll open up for questions. While we're waiting to take questions, I want to start with undergrad students who worked at Maryland. You spoke about the impact that this has. What other extracurricular activities do you also combine with the science, the STEM activities that you've been involved in? Because we also believe that we want our students to be well-rounded who engage in STEM. Tell us a little bit about what you do outside of this.
Hi, okay. So I'm actually wearing the pin from an organization that I'm a part of, or was a part of on campus, the American Society for Microbiology, which has chapters at universities all over the world, or all over America. And that's something that I worked with extensively in college, doing both outreach, mentorship, teaching everywhere from middle school students to high school students to even college students what they can do in the sciences, to working on clinics, on campus, off campus, doing other kinds of outreach and mentorship has been phenomenal.
Personally, I run a math and biology tutoring program that works in local high schools to bring people up to the standards you need to pursue college degrees in STEM successfully. And both Gary and I have been involved in far too many internships. Gary at NIH, myself at the Department of Homeland Security, University of Pennsylvania, all over the place doing biological and STEM research. So,
any questions from the audience? I'd like to direct my next question to the freshmen. Tell me a little bit about what your long-term goals and plans are.
Well, actually, I'm just going into high school right now, so there are a lot of great programs at our school. There's the robotics program. We have a high school ISS program, which actually does similar experiments to with genes, with crystallization, and we've put over 100 plus science experiments to the International Space Station. So I plan to continue research with that program for the next 4 years. You know, grow as a person. You know, trying to.
Well, in the next 12 months, if you have a college application you want to send me, I'll be happy to take it. As a matter of fact, you might be applying for my job soon. And your colleague from your high school, the junior, I think you made an excellent point about the fact that a lot of times we focus our efforts at students who are already academically inclined, et cetera. But in truth and in fact, there's a lot of opportunity to bring folks in who may not initially feel they have an affinity for math and science, as an example. And tell us a little bit about your experience with that and what your plans are long term.
Well, I guess I felt like no, I can't do any of that. Like, that's too hard for me. And it wasn't until my mentors from my Firehouse program pushed me, they told me, we really think you're able to be in this program. We chose you to be in this program. I think there was only about space for 11 kids in Andrew Hill, and they chose me out of their whole Firehouse program that they had at Andrew Hill. And it was kind of eye-opening, oh shoot, they really think I have potential, but I didn't I guess I was being too hard on myself, and I didn't really want to give it a try. But then after I was like, okay, you know what, I'm gonna give it a try, see how it goes, and if I don't like it, I'll just stop going or something. But so I ended up going, and it was really, how do you say, everybody was so nice there, and all the other students too, where I came from, I didn't know like anything about science or anything like that. And my teacher, Liz Balkin, she kept reminding us like, it's okay if you don't know anything. Like that's what we're here for. We're here to teach you and like to actually like to teach you about science and stuff. And she told us herself she's not a science teacher, but she was able to teach us and really good too. And oh yeah, so I kept trying the program, and I was like, okay, like it's all right. I mean, I like it. Like I'm learning stuff, and it's actually like the kids around me. Like there's no like we were all really like a family. Like we were growing to be like a family, and so yeah. Turns out I stayed throughout the program, and I did have friends that went in the program with me, and they ended up leaving. And I had like those thoughts, like, oh, like, why am I gonna keep going? My friend just left. Like, why am I gonna still be here? Like, but then I pushed those thoughts aside, and I was like, okay, like I'm gonna keep doing it. Like this is for me, not them. And so I kept going, and yeah, I'm here now.
Good. Well, we're very glad that you stuck with it. Howard University has a middle school focused on math and science on the campus, and one of the observations that we've made is there's nothing like giving a kid confidence in terms of having them really believe in their academic pursuits, and I think you see that on display here today. I think we have a question from the audience. How many engineers does it take to turn on a mic? Let's see. I'll give you mine.
Hey guys. So first of all, I think it's just such an inspiration to those of us who are scientists and a little bit older than you to see what you guys are doing at your age and how accomplished you already are. And so since you are accomplished scientists now, what's a piece of advice that you would give to the next generation that would follow in your footsteps?
Let's have Craft Academy answer that question.
Personally, I would say don't limit yourself. When I got to Craft, I wasn't really sure what I was capable of or what opportunities were going to come my way. But always keep your eyes open. Opportunities pass you every day, and you need to be chomping at the bit to just take advantage of that. I mean, people want you to succeed. People want to see the next generation doing well. They don't want you to fail, so don't let yourself fail. Surround yourself with good people. The Craft Academy blessed Danielle and I with a whole slew of staff that just showered us with love and support, and I mean, that's the most important advice I can give.
And then for me personally, my biggest piece of advice is to really take initiative with your future. Just like with Jalissa, even though maybe to her it didn't seem like at the time, she was taking her future into her hands when she decided to stay at her program and tough it out. And I think just like with Will and I, we took the initiative to ask a professor, even though as high schoolers at the time in a university full of college students, if we could participate in research with him. And I think he recognized that ability that we were taking our future into our hands and we were asking. And it never hurts to ask because all I can tell you is no, and then you keep pushing. So I think for me, that's the biggest piece of advice.
Okay, and the last question we'll take, I'll direct to NASA Hunch, and this is someone from the audience who has a question. Okay, we do.
My name is Dan Barstra. I'm the education manager with CASIS and the Space Station Explorers. And first of all, you did a terrific job, and every time we come here, we're all exhilarated. I'm wondering about whether you had ever met each other before, and whether you have any interest in some kind of a community to keep you all connected. Because there are many other students who are joining this incredible sort of cutting edge. The astronauts have a group called the Association of Space Explorers, and once you've been an astronaut, you join that and you get together and share things. Are you interested in such a community to help others, and what ideas do you have if there were such a community?
All right, so I guess to answer your first question, we have not met before this. But I think just the community, at least here, from what I've seen, is just so supportive and incredible. It is, like was said before, there's nobody wanting anybody to fail. It's all positive reinforcement. Anything kind of said is all for the improvement of whether it be students or people working on projects or whatever it be. And a community like that is just a begging for absolute success in whatever field it happens to be in. So in the field of, I guess, students in engineering and trying to pioneer the next generation to actually work on projects like was said yesterday, getting to Mars or getting to the moon, or the next steps in NASA and SpaceX, a community like that is absolutely necessary. And I would even maybe go to say that it's not possible without a community like that. But in terms of what I think would be like, I guess, suggestions or things like that for a community like that would just be more of a broad network for everybody, and more, even more opportunities than are already here, and just making sure that everybody knows that the opportunities are here, because we're in such a fortunate position to be able to actually participate in these things, but a lot of people don't know that these opportunities exist. There are plenty of people, even at the school we go to, even at Eagle Crest, that just simply didn't even know about this until I was talking to them, and they were like, "Oh, really? We have a project that went into space? I didn't even know about that." And they're at the very school that we're at, and so it's just we need to make sure that everybody knows that this is a program that exists, so that they can take advantage of the opportunities that are here.
And you know, it's a small world. A lot of these engineering STEM activities are all interconnected. I know that I was drawn into this through classes that I take, interests that I have, to classes, to extracurriculars, and they really draw on each other, and it really builds a very large network that really connects us all. And you know, between the amazing community that all these that everyone here makes, and everyone anywhere else in the STEM field makes, it really just makes such a difference to everybody in these kinds of programs.
So I have a simple life philosophy, and that is that I obsess about the journey of life, and there's no destination that I'll come upon that will completely fulfill me. And I think this is a classic example of why experiments that don't work bring people together, opens up opportunities for friendship and collaboration, but more importantly, I think the humanity of what we must do when we do STEM must never get lost when we do it. And you guys are absolutely the epitome of that example. So I thank you for exposing yourselves to us today, because this has been richly rewarding for me. Thank you very much.
So thank you all panelists. Thank you, Dr. Frederick from Howard University, for coming out and spending this time with us. Let's give Dr. Frederick a hand. So this is, I mean, a fantastic example of what we can do with this awesome platform that we have in low Earth orbit. And this is also, I think, a fantastic example of how we can utilize this precious national laboratory that we have in space right now. And this is just a small cross-section. I mean, I get the good fortune of working with folks like this all the time, really on a day in and day out basis with the rest of our team at CASIS. And you would think after a period of time, you would kind of, I guess, get used to it or not appreciate so much the genius of these young folks and the real science and the real technology that they're developing. But I'll tell you, every time you get to see something like this and interact with young folks like this and their teachers and their programs that they work with, it really is touching. You just don't lose that feel for how important it is. We're doing a lot, but we need to do more. We've got some fantastic programs. This is just a few examples. I would encourage everyone who's here, if you can, walk the STEM birdcage, the STEM hallway, and familiarize yourself with what we're doing. We're looking for more ideas. We're looking for more partners. We're looking for more resources. We're doing a lot, but we're still not doing enough. You know, we have a goal to reach 2 million kids by 2020 with our programs, and we're on track, but to get there, we need the support, we need the collaboration of this community. So please do what you can to contribute, bring us your ideas, bring us your resources, and get on board with us. It's a vital mission. It's a real key to not only our country in the United States, but really for the good of humankind on this planet. And I think you've heard a lot of information here today, that you've heard a lot from a lot of plenaries and a lot of luminaries, and you hear a lot of those themes and threads coming from some young people. So I think we're on the right track. So let's keep it going. With that, we'll segue into the lunch. You guys have a great lunch and a great rest of the day. Thank you.